Hello, everyone. My name is John Chan from 2X Growth Agency, and you're listening to the S.M.E Stories Podcast.
You are now listening to the next great small business podcast. Welcome to the S.M.E Stories Podcast, where it is all about small businesses in Canada. And here's your host, Ken Alfred.
Hey, Bert, thanks for on the show. We got a great episode today with John Chan. Now, John Chan is the owner of 2X Growth Agency. John Chan is an entrepreneur with a passion for user experience design and a wide range of interests that makes him a true polymath. At the young age of 19, John dropped out of university to start his own web design consultancy, which led him to work for companies like UBC and Basecamp before fully transitioning into entrepreneurship. Throughout his career, John started 3 businesses, each showcasing his diverse skill set and experience. His latest venture, 2X Growth Agency, is a digital marketing agency that specializes in helping e-commerce and direct-to-consumer brands grow and scale with paid ads and ad creative development. Despite his busy schedule as an entrepreneur, John also invests in real estate with a portfolio of 4 properties, having sold 3. He's also a black belt in Taekwondo and has been training in the sport since he was 6 years old, representing Team Canada 3 times internationally. 2X Growth Agency, under John's leadership, has managed over $6 million of ad spend and helped generate over $30 million in revenue for their clients. All right, so we're going to have a great episode today with John Chan from 2X Growth Agency, so sit back and absorb. Okay, next question here. So what do people, is there a misconception people have when you tell them what kind of business you do in terms of, I'm in the marketing industry, I run an ad agency. Do you ever get people who have they don't really know what that actually means and misconstrued what actually you do?
To some extent, yes, only because marketing as a field, people fairly have a deep understanding of, and I think because consumers generally spend time on Google or spend time on social media, and they see ads all the time. So when you point at that and say that's what you do, or when you explain that's the thing you do, people conceptually understand it. I think what they misunderstand is the difference between one marketer versus the next, as with all fields, right? And understanding. Consultants and agencies generally get a bad rep, and I actually do empathize with that, because for our business, fortunate for us but unfortunate for a lot of business owners, sometimes we see the best accounts that we manage are the ones that are mismanaged accounts. And so just like I was saying earlier, that it's very easy to get into the business, it also means it's kind of hard to vet. It's not a regulated industry where when you sell services, you're leaving on the good faith of the person that they said they're going to do the work really well. I think the misconceptions comes down to the vetting and the trusting of is this somebody that we can actually work with, and how do I know that? And I think from my own experience in hiring other people, the way that I approximate that is, how do you know if you're going to hire a good accountant, or how do you know if you're going to hire a good lawyer? Where you fundamentally, as a business owner, need to know how to vet people that are experts in a field that's different than your own. And so somehow with marketing, just because of the lower barrier of entry to this type of work and this type of business, we just see, maybe call it bad actors, but also what breeds a certain sentiment about people. And so I think the actual work in itself, probably not, just because it's well understood from a consumer standpoint. But the reputation, sometimes you find ourselves a bit of a hurdle, until you have a slightly longer conversation. People are like, oh, okay, you clearly know what you're doing.
Well, yeah, my reference to the advertising and marketing industry was honestly Full House and Who's the Boss. If you remember any of those. That's what I thought it was going to be. Storyboard of this. And I remember thinking as a kid, I think, wow, I would love to work. It looks like it's a fun job. I get to create things. And at that time, I get to create things that people hate. Commercials. Because if you're watching your TV show, the one thing you hate about a TV show is the commercials that come up. I'm like, why am I wanting to get into this? It looked fun, but yeah, it's funny when I think about stuff like that. But all right, let me ask you your next question here. I always ask to all my guests, what has been running 2X right now for you, your biggest failure, but also your biggest success so far?
I think the biggest failure we've had multiple situations where our company was in a brink of collapse. And in each one of those cases was different sort of financial terms that was basically bad deals that we brokered, or just had a hard time with sales, what have you. And so we've had, I think that the most traumatic experience that we basically ran into was when a bad deal where the partnership went south, where back in, maybe this long time now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had a partnership deal where we went into co-pitching for a government contract. And it's not a standard work that we would typically do, but it was a lucrative contract at the time. relative for what it was. And it was basically working for the BC government. And the procurement process was long and arduous, where you had to submit an RFP, you had to go through all these processes, and we had a joint application that we filed that we won the bid and application for. But we effectively got screwed over. So in the deals of the terms of the contract, they structured it as they're the main contract owners and we were subcontractors. And the moment we won the deal, they basically cut us out. But through that process, we basically had to rebuild our business and agency because it was very disruptive to the core business, and we lost our other clients trying to win this contract and those type of things like that. Um, and then there's other like smaller deals or whatever issues that have had happened between, but it was more structurally financials and those type of things, just bad management and on our part and experiences with to learn, but also just understanding contract terms and being better at protecting ourselves, I think was one a big really big thing. Greatest successes, I think, for us, I still remember the first time we helped the brand make millions, or the first $1 million, right? I think for us, for the brands that we work with, we primarily work with, we have a range of brands that are in 8 figures versus ones that are on a smaller side. And, you know, we didn't anticipate it to be that way, at least in the beginning, from the inexperience of where we came from. But taking a brand from maybe like, $250,000 in sales per year to $4 million in sales in a year in this course of like 12 months, that was very exciting. And the first time we did it basically gave us the confidence boost that we basically needed for all the other things that we can do. Because we always punched above our weight, knowing what we could do versus what we actually did. And so that was a very interesting and pivotal moment. And that was also a few years ago at this point now. And so we've definitely had more successes afterwards, but the first one always felt the best, right? And so I think seeing how things really come together.
What did you do to celebrate it? Did
What
you
did we
take
do
the
to
staff?
celebrate? Go back to
What did
work.
you guys go back to
Honestly,
work?
no, honestly, just go back to work, because I think we didn't have like big celebrations, because we have this notion in the culture of my wife and I when we work together that we don't want to celebrate prematurely, right? And so it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to let your guard down.
Setting the
Yeah,
precedence, right? Like, oh, okay, let's all go to Vegas, and then
yeah,
we hit
we
our
don't do
first,
that.
let's say, million.
No,
The
we
next
don't
thing you
do
know, all
that.
right, we hit 2 million. We got to go to Hawaii now, and then we got to
Yeah,
go to Europe now. No, we don't want to. I see.
yeah. I
At
mean, we'll
least take
probably
them to
have
dinner.
a meal like to celebrate after like a long day type of thing. That's
There
like
we
a
go.
more nicer thing. But I think beyond that, I think we try to keep ourselves, nose to the grindstone,
Honest.
and also just a little bit of like this slight paranoia that, hey, you know what, if you let your guard down, things in like cruise. And so we don't really want to do that. And it's also because we also like the work too. At least for me, I really like the work too, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting and exciting, and you just do more of it if it works, right?
Unless the government decides to tack on extra tariffs and fees on stuff that now everything costs more, then that'd be a different story. They'd be like, okay, forget that party we're going to do. We're just going to Starbucks. That's about it. That's all we're doing. Right.
Slight
So,
problem there.
okay.
Yes, true.
Okay. So great. Now we're going to do our tips from the pro segment here. Now we're going to focus on things where people are kind of maybe wanting to follow almost in your footsteps there. So just having some questions on that. So, all right, the first question for you, John. Starting out an agency, is there any niches that you think that someone who's just starting out, there's actually an untapped market that they have an opportunity to do it? Because obviously you do a lot of things already and you're already
Sure.
very successful at it. But for someone who's starting out, any profitable niches you think about that they should think about?
I think it's more about paying attention to the services and businesses or short answer is no, but I think there's a lot of opportunities is the real reason why, because our agencies is talent arbitrage. And so you can be, if you look at any department within any business or any company, you look at HR, you look at accounting, you look at marketing, you look at sales, each one of those functions, people could hire in a full-time staff, or they can hire a subcontract agency where they can onboard very quickly and get their staff started, or swap out staffing if needed, right? So placement for people placement, I think, is an agency, it's a really big opportunity. And I think right now, 2023, 2024, post pandemic, global arbitrage is a real thing where, maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, you hear Tim Ferriss write about, the 4 hour work week, where you could like hire a VA in India or you hire a VA in Philippines. And I think the pandemic and the shift to remote work has really accelerated that process, where you can hire people from Latin America, you hire people from Ukraine, you hire people all over. I think there's a lot of advantage for that outside of just differences in currencies. It's just differences in work cultures and perspectives and languages, and those type of things are a lot of advantages. But the niche wise, right, talent arbitrage aside, it's the fact that, if you pay attention to any industry where you see a particular need, I think there's a lots right now, and even for ourselves, right, when we part of the reason why we are on this podcast is because we had a podcast agency, and so we didn't think of like looking for a publicist or that kind of thing specifically to do this type of work, but there's a niche for that. So I can't say to any specific niche, but I just know there's lots of opportunities right now, largely because of, a lot of us can start a new business with our laptop, a fast internet connection, and a will to put in the hours to make something work.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for listeners to understand too. Like everyone who's starting to start, let's say they want to get into the marketing space, you have some kind of background in some type of interests. Maybe start with that. If you really, for some reason, you like watching a lot of those home renovation shows, then maybe think about maybe doing marketing for more like construction companies or home renovators. Okay, that's a good starting point because at least you kind of know a little bit about it, then you can probably help it. Versus
Absolutely.
thinking, okay, which business should I focus on? Like which industry? The world. Okay, you have to narrow it down just a little bit because that's going to be very complicated. So
For sure.
start
And
small, 5
I should add preface to that, because I think one of the things that is given within that initial sort of advice is the fact that within the world of possibilities is largely because we have access to information that was otherwise not had before, right? I'm lucky in a sense where I dropped out and I was able to learn basically everything on my own because we have access to the internet, but also because I picked an industry where I'm not required to have a degree. If I'm pursuing to be a doctor or a neurosurgeon, you probably want to finish that degree. But outside of that, where if I'm applying to do a work where people are looking at my track record, that wasn't even part of the question, it's a luxury to be had. And so I think paying attention to opportunities, paying attention to access to information, paying attention to the fact that there's AI to help you, get like good enough for a lot of different types of initial production and output, basically just opens you up to a lot of different things that you otherwise were not able to do before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something to really consider. All these things when you look at that, there's a lot of opportunities there, and really have some fun with it. And like you said, you're not beholden to one industry. For some reason, you're really good at one thing, but you really want to try something else. There's no harm in trying, right? As long as you develop that track record. Because I can tell you right now, for the most part, when you are starting your company, when you're trying to land a client, no one's asking you what your GPA was in school.
Absolutely.
you know, or they're not asking what kind of degree it was. Now, like you said, it's different if, let's say, you're trying to become like a medical consultant, and they say, "Are you a former doctor? Are you a pharmacy background or something like that?" Different story. Or if you're trying to be a legal consultant, are you actually a law? What kind of law did you pass, or did you practice?
Sure.
Different stories, right? But
For
for
sure.
just most business perspective, you're generally okay. So,
For sure.
okay,
And
next question. Go ahead, finish your thought.
I was gonna say, like, in the absence of that, you can also partner too, right? So if you want to get into the legal business, find a legal partner that you can work with that you can actually fill in that stopgap, right? So I think hard technical skills are really important, but also even in the absence of certain things, partnerships and business, there's lots of ways to approach that type of work.
I like it. Partnerships also really good. All right. All right. Next question. How do you keep yourself up to date with the current marketing trends?
I mean, paying a consumer really helps. So paying attention to different trends, exposing yourself to different types of platforms. So in my case, if I'm spending time and understanding what's happening within, like the Google platforms and advertising space, pay attention to like current events. So for example, like I said earlier, the DOJ just had an antitrust ruling last week. Understand the implications of that. That would lead me to have a competitive advantage in doing the work that I do. If I'm on paid social, spend time on paid social. Pay attention to what organic creators are creating, and understanding what what moves the needle and whatnot. When we watch YouTube videos, we don't pay for premium because we can observe and study ads. So I think for us, it's just keeping abreast of what's going on and just be a consumer, and I think that really helps us a lot. And also, while we're doing that on the consumer side, just pay attention to people that are developing new ideas and concepts within just the space that you're in. There's always new innovators within the space. You don't have to be one yourself, but being close at second or being close at third, that really helps within the industry.
I like your other one too, like be a consumer. It's like, never really thought about that before. Because I think if you're on the selling side, you're only thinking about what kind of product, what kind of service, what kind of technology you're using, as opposed to thinking, what do my consumers want? Like, let me just watch as a consumer and see what I'm seeing, right? Then maybe I can translate that into how I can solve those problems for all these different consumers. So, yeah, no, I like that. Okay, next question. What makes a good marketing firm from it? Sorry, what What separates a good marketing firm from an average marketing firm?
I would say two very important things. The first one is marketing is sales at scale. So if you have anyone that's understanding and good at the sales process, whether if it's the initial sales call with meeting them versus understanding how to sell a product, you want to work with somebody who knows how to sell your product better than you do. And so if they don't know how to do that on a one-to-one basis, how are they going to be able to do that on a one-to-many basis? So I think having a very solid fundamental or understanding and to do that in a very non-sleazy type of way of just using different tricks and psychological tactics, I think is a very strong mark of a good marketer. But the second piece to it is because digital advertising is largely the main advantage is the fact that everything that you do online can be traceable and trackable. And so, in an online advertising world, the ability to track things and do things accurately, in our case, because we had a technical background of doing some software and writing code and those type of things, really helped us translate to being having confidence in the way that we do our advertising. Because if you have an advertising dollar a budget of like $10,000 or $100,000, you want to make sure that it comes back profitably at 1.5 or 2.5. And so I guess I'll throw in a third one. So being good at sales is really important because it's a function of marketing and understanding how it's a function of marketing. Being good at tracking because it gives you confidence in the way that you do your marketing and managing and running marketing campaigns without uncertainty. And the third one is being good at math, right? If you don't have to be a mathematician, but you have to understand fundamentals to know how to calculate what is the gross margins of a particular product from a unit economic basis to know that if you hit a certain figure that you're going to be able to scale confidently. And so being a function of these three things are very important and functional for like a strong marketer. And if you had like a bonus point, is basically if you translate all of those things, is to execute marketing campaigns fairly well. And that depends on the platform that you're in. If it's on Google, it's being a good copywriter and being good with web page designs. If you're on paid social, it's good at storytelling and be able to communicate visuals, how to sell a product in an image form or in video form. But that will be like on the tail end because the first three are the most important piece.
Nice. Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay. Last couple of questions here on Tips from the Pro here. Okay. So, what is the best billing practice for when you're starting up? Now, we talked a little
Mm.
bit about that. You mentioned a little bit. You have monthly retainers, you have, percentage of ad sales and, rev generation as well. What would you say would be a good starting point for a new person?
It depends on the business that you're in. In our case, because we can tie in the performance and the value that we generate to a percentage of ad spend, I think that's a really important aspect. But the one that you want to end up with is basically the one that you find alignment with, and the one that I would advise against is billing against your time because it trains the people that are hiring you in a certain way where they're like counting minutes, counting hours, and you don't really want to focus on that. You really want to focus on the value that you deliver. And so tying the value and the outcome of the work, I think is the best kind of case scenario, or approximating your work because you can misspend budgets and still get paid for it too. So there's a misalignment there, but figure out ways that align the work that you produce with your end result and your business service model would be the best case, and one with a larger sort of like upsides is usually the best one. And I think from an actual billing practice, that's not the pricing model per se, is make sure you include pre-billing in some way, shape, or form. And so in our case, we always have a flat monthly retainer that we pre-bill, and then we take the percentage difference on the following month. And the reason for that is because, as we talked about earlier in lessons and collection, some people don't pay. Some people would ask for free work and spec work. And if you standardize your billing model that you get prepaid, at the very least, you're de-risked from having to hire somebody and not being able to pay them because you have to pay your staff and your pay operations, regardless if somebody decides to pay you or not.
Right. Exactly. Oh, good one. All right. Last question on here. What is your best strategy for dealing with difficult clients?
Be in a position where you don't have to rely on them is the best case scenario. So having optionality, it's no different than an employer. It's no different than clients. It's one of those things where if you are in a starving business, beggars can't be choosers, and we've definitely been in that position before. And so over time we've learned to be more selective with the people that we work with, and also just how to position yourself in a client relationship where people look to you as a position of strength, where they don't want to just hire anybody, they want to hire you specifically because they value the inputs that you have, because losing you would be detrimental to their business. People will treat you differently if they fundamentally see you in that way, and that requires you to be good at the work that you do. That requires you to know how to people manage and have good relationship skills. But at the end of the day, it's about being in a position where you don't need to rely on them is the best case, because you're in the people business and you're going to come across people with all kinds of personalities, and so you're going to have to learn how to deal with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's almost like you want to fire your client if you can, right?
Of
If you
course,
can, because at the end of the day, the last thing you want is honestly, you know, turning on your email Monday morning and just dreading that particular client reaching out to you because you're thinking,
of
oh
course,
God,
of course,
I don't want that, right? So it's almost like pre-qualifying them at all to make sure that if there's a good fit. And I think a lot of business should actually do that and not just take after everybody, right?
of
Because
course.
you're trying to target everyone, you get no one, right? Because you're just, that doesn't work that way. Just really find your ideal client and just focus on that only. So, okay, now we're going to hit the rapid fire round. Now this is more of the fun, relaxed questions as opposed to all the serious stuff we've been talking about.
Now it's time for the rapid fire round.
So, all right, let's do this, John. All right, what word or phrase do you most overuse?
Probably actually.
Actually, you sound like a lawyer. Actually,
My wife
I
accuses
know
me
that.
of being one.
Well, I know. Actually, my son says he wants to be a lawyer. Now he's going to be turning 10, and he learned it through Roblox. And
That's
apparently,
funny.
there's a video game in Roblox that you can actually be a prosecutor or a defense attorney, and the other viewers are the jury, and you have to kind of type out your arguments. And like, I like that, Dad. I'm like, oh, okay. If you want to be a lawyer, sure. I'm not
That's
against
funny.
that. Well, he also wanted to be a YouTuber. I'm like, well, a lot of work. You got to do it.
I mean, a lot of
But
options
hey,
at this age, right? So
well, that's the thing. Like, it's almost like a good or bad thing. I don't know what you want to call it, but back in my day when we talked about what we wanted to be, there's a lot of people that said, "Oh, I want to be like a doctor, lawyer, professional athlete." A lot of kids nowadays, at least in North America, they want to be YouTubers or influencers, which is interesting. I'm like, hmm. I guess the really successful ones really make it look that easy. That all you gotta do is put on like a little 30-second clip or minute clip, and then next thing you know, sponsors are throwing all their products at you, and you can get all this stuff and all that sort of thing. But it's actually a lot of work and
for
stuff like
sure,
that, you know?
for sure.
All right. Next question. What is something that most people are obsessed with that you just don't get?
I think fame and recognition, I think, is overrated. And as we're doing this like public speaking podcast, what have you, I think as I walk away from this, the thing that care about the most is the people that don't see me in that public eye. And so I think for the same reason why people are drawn to be into influencers or follow different people, I think it's somewhat a little bit misguided, but also understandable.
Yeah, no, I totally hear. Like, I was going to say even something even lighter. Like, my wife is obsessed with the Olympics. I like the Olympics. I enjoy it, but like honestly, man, she was watching my wife, Mrs. K, would she'd have the TV on, her tablet on, and her phone on with three different sports. I'm like, how the hell are you watching all this at once?
I mean,
Right? I don't
it's
get it.
it's a peak of human excellence, so I can see the appeal for it. So,
Well, yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. And it's almost funny because when my daughter was born, it was during the 2012 Olympics,
hmm,
where I think she almost like, I guess she really enjoyed it. She's like, oh, I wonder if we should have a child every time the Olympics comes on. I'm like, we're not going to plan our child making around the Olympics. That's not
yeah,
going to be something that we're going to be doing. Right.
yeah.
So we'll just take it easy. If it happens, it happens. But all right, next thing here. All right. This one, I asked a few marketers about this, and they almost bit my head off. All right, would you rather go 30 days without your phone or an entire lifetime without dessert?
30 days without my phone. Desserts is awesome, but it's also like I think I detest the idea of being so attached to your phone where you can't get rid of it for 30 days. So I would even take that
Yeah.
just for the challenge, not so much about care about desserts.
Yeah, well, no, it is interesting because we tried this old school thing with my kids because sometimes the kids nowadays they're really doing this in front of the screen, and my kids sometimes do their chores with it, and it gets really annoying. That I think one time I punished my son by pulling his phone away, and he had to like, okay, you can't really if you want to. We almost tried to make it like an 80s, 90s, even early 2000s lifestyle where, okay, you're call forwarding your phone to our family house phone. So if anyone calls, the family house phone is the only one that rings.
Hmm,
If you want to watch anything on your screen, you're watching the main TV. And we have a Samsung Smart TV where I think with Samsung, they have like this thing where it's like Samsung Plus, which is just a bunch of old TV episodes that can even be from like 10 years ago. But it is in that kind of like what it was like back then. So you'd be watching something and then a commercial would hit. There was
right.
no skip ads, there was no on demand. So whatever episode you see, that's
That's
what
what
it
you see.
is.
Yeah,
That's what you see. And if you remember when you were younger too, like when you didn't have that exposure of on demand, it was be like, okay, you watch your favorite show, okay, it's done. You can either channel surf to see if there's another kind of show that you might find interesting, or you adjust and either call your buddies, go out and do all that sort of stuff. So we're kind of making that into that atmosphere. So he's having an interesting time with that. I'm just going to tell you that. So, all
I
right,
appreciate that.
last couple of last couple of questions here, John. So, all right, I always ask this for my last guest. If you could make your own sandwich, what would be on it, and what would you call it?
If I can make my own sandwich, um, I don't know. I'm not that creative with food because I like the old reliable. So I'm probably gonna stick with like, oh no, I'm gonna screw this up. Peanut butter and something. I like peanut butter and condensed milk, but I didn't invent that. But
Ooh, condensed
that's
milk is really good.
that is really
Hong
good.
Kong style breakfast. I love it.
So you know,
And what would you call it?
oh gosh,
You're creative, man. You can come up with a creative name for this thing.
not on the spot. So if you give me a night to think about it, I'll probably come up with something slightly more clever than you putting me in a spot. But I'll think of something. And I'll email it to you if I find out.
I'm never going to receive that email, folks.
Yeah,
Just letting you
basically.
know.
I'm letting you know that too right now.
All right. What is your theme song and why? So you've heard this
My
before. So you're
theme
walking down the
song.
street. That theme song hits when you're walking down the street. Everyone knows that John's coming.
I actually don't know because I think I've had a lot of like interest and mood shifts over the years. You know, like if I look at my the things I listen to now, I listen to a lot of EDM and I listen to a lot of like I actually listen to a lot of things that don't have like a particular name associated with it. I'll just have like a 2 hour like sort of a long playlist. So I don't know largely because of that, but I'll probably tell you like the mood is probably EDM.
Yeah, no, EDM actually I really like as well. Like usually when I'm working out,
Yeah.
or sometimes if I'm cooking and I just want to listen. And it's funny, my wife will come home from coming home from work and she sees me cooking with EDM music. She's like, you're not in your 20s anymore. You're not in your 30s. You're in your 40s. What are you doing? Listen to this.
You know what's interesting is like you just shift that from like regular EDM that like from the stuff you might listen to at rave to something like that's chill house. That's the a lower it's such a different mood, but I really enjoy that, and I think that's the kind of like state where I am right now.
Well, absolutely, right? I mean, hey, you're as young as you feel. So regardless of whatever gets you in that zone of whatever you're trying to do, it doesn't matter. And I've had guests that say, they like a WWE theme, and I have
Yeah,
other guests that say they're like, "You Are My Sunshine." I'm like, nothing wrong with it. It's just whatever gets you going and whatever gets you motivated. So that's really great. So, all right. So at last thing we have, just wrapping up here, John, is there any other piece of advice you want to give to the listeners out there, whether they're starting or they're in a business? What would you overall give advice to give them?
I think the one consistent advice that I would have given myself if I was to go back to my earlier part of my career that I think I did correctly was I focus on the value and I focus on the things that I focus on delivering value. And what I mean by that is like, if you generally have the skills to help someone make $1 million, how are you not going to make 100 for yourself? Right. And you just multiply that per like 10 million, look at whatever else. I think having the fundamental skills to grow a business or to, take something much bigger than what it really is and make a meaningful contribution to that. I think that's a very important skill. And that could be in the form of employment. It doesn't have to be a business. And if you find that the contractual terms of the employment terms, doesn't make sense for the value that you have, you just naturally roll on your own anyways. But I think from a career perspective, that was probably the most helpful advice that I've followed, which is probably part of the reason why I've been sent in all these different directions because I kept learning the next new thing, right? Where like design to software to coding to marketing. And then now, 15 years in or 20 years in, I have this hodgepodge of like all these cross disciplinary skill sets that is very hard to replace. So I think for anyone that's listening, I would really advise you to follow that sort of path to figuring out, what is it within your field or industry that allows you to make the most money for somebody else and ultimately, again, eventually for yourself.
Awesome. Great final word. So where can people reach out to you?
I'm JTC Chan on Twitter or X and LinkedIn. So you can find it's gonna be tough because there's a lot of John Chans. But if you look for John Chan 2X, you'll find me. And or you can just reach out on our marketing site. We're at 2x.agency. That's the website URL. And you can always book a call and reach out, even if it's not a business inquiry. So always love to hear from folks.
All right. Well, great. Thanks, John, for being on the episode. It was a lot of fun.
Ken, appreciate it.
Hey you, do you need a voiceover? Well, look no farther. Northway Capital Group has your answer. Commercials and explainer videos, AVR and voicemail, health and wellness, corporate training and e-learning, announcements, documentaries, and biography. Contact us on social media or email us at northwaycapitalgroup@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to the S.M.E Stories podcast, which is owned by Northway Capital Group. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Northway Capital Group.